Hey, good morning, Ian.
Morning, Dougie.
How you doing, mate?
I'm all right, thank you. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm well. I managed to get out camping on Wednesday night.
Excellent.
I haven't been camping for wow, was it November, I think, of last year?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
We're not in lockdown. I'd be camping at least once a week up in Kielder or somewhere out with my hammock on my tent.
You
So I'm feeling
might not
refreshed.
want to be up at Kielder this weekend, I tell you that much.
It's gonna be
Weather's
cold.
warming up.
It's gonna be cold. Yeah. So there's the session on Sunday that you're putting together for swarm control. Is that right?
It's
No.
more about kind of queen rearing, really. It's just kind of there's all this bun fight going on at the moment about kind of imports and which I can't be asked to get involved with, even though it kind of sort of people behaving badly again, and beekeeping can live without all of that shit.
Definitely.
Anyway, the thing that it does flag up is if you don't want people to import, you've got to offer an alternative, really, haven't you?
Yeah.
And the reason that people do import is because, and you're never going to make a complete replacement because you can't breed queens in March in this country.
Yeah.
Which is when a lot of people want them. But I think associations, and we're not brilliant at it, I've got to say, need to kind of try and fill a gap there somewhere.
Yeah.
And it really isn't my strength. I've messed around with it and been on, and I've been trying to work out over a long period of time what is going on with it. It can't be that kind of monumentally. And a lot of people sell it on, oh, it's really simple, all you need to do is this. But there's just so many methods. And even if you sort of think, oh, I think I understand that method, then somebody adds about 4 variations to that method.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, the print, if you can get as far down, dig as far down as the principles, that's all right. You can kind of get those. But just trying to work out, and I mean, I went to one of the BBKA courses a while ago, and it really made me laugh because it's like every other course I've been along to, within 5 minutes we were on to grafting. And the guy started in about 2 minutes in, the guy went, oh, well, there was this method I used to use for about 20 years, but we're not going to talk about that. That's far too basic. And after about 2 days of listening to this guy, I went back to him at the end and went, do you want to just elaborate on that method? Oh, no, I'm not going to teach anyone that method. And it's kind of like, well, you fucking used it for 20 years, mate. What was wrong?
Yeah. I think that's like, as an association, that has to be the best way forward, like finding the easiest way, the most simple way to explain, and the basic way, sharing that with the membership. And then if people want to use a more complex way or a different way, or grafting, which seems to be the one to go to, so be it. But if someone's got a method that they've used for 20 years that's successful, bloody share it, because we want to know.
The trouble is that again, there's so many. Any book that's called Simple Queen Rearing, take with a massive pinch of salt. The only kind of decent thing I have to say I've ever seen really is that Roger Patterson kind of talk a couple of weeks back, where it actually did, without going into all the Bibber kind of real sort of ideological, sort of slightly Aryan, which it does make me uncomfortable sometimes. Stuff. He actually did explain simple queen rearing. And there is one method that, after a lot of rooting around in this, just keeps coming back. And it's the Demery method of doing it, which in principle is pretty simple. I mean, and it doesn't take masses more resources. It doesn't mean you've got to go out and buy a shed load of apodias. And it's kind of designed for, I mean, the reason I don't like queen rearing a lot of the times is that it's not I don't want to improve my stock. I'll do that sort of little bit by little bit, but I don't want 20 queens. I've got nowhere to put them. And I've got a fair few colonies. If you've only got 1 or 2, most of these methods almost immediately go beyond the scale of anything you want to do. Anyway, so have a little chat about, but apart from sort of trying to just sort of explain a possible method amongst many, just sort of see if people sort of hook on and what people would like to do with the idea of it, because I'm not trying to pretend I've got all the solutions for it.
No.
But it's just, what can we do? What can we do about it? Because the number of imports is getting silly.
Ridiculous.
This thing's.
I saw the figures of how many have been imported in the past couple of years. It's ridiculous.
It was up to about 22,000 or something like that last year, and it goes up about 10% plus a year.
And I do wonder, with speaking to beekeepers, I mean, you saw that poll that I put on the British and Irish, because that's where most of the fuss was coming from. And it was staggering the amount of people saying, no, I won't get imported bees. And there was only like up to maybe less than 15 that said, yes, I would. So it makes us wonder, is it just the new beekeepers doing it, or are existing beekeepers getting fooled and thinking they're getting locally bred queens, but they're not in fact getting that? If the import numbers are so high, people are saying, well, I won't do this. It's like, where they're coming from and
I think it's commercial beekeepers as well. I mean, it took many commercial beekeepers to start importing, and the numbers,
I suppose if they've got hundreds of colonies themselves, and
if they're requeening, and some people, don't get me wrong, I mean, buckfast really aren't bred in this country anymore. Some people sort of really, really like buckfast, and they'll be off to Denmark most of the time for them. But a lot of the imports, I suspect, as you suggest, are coming in for first time, newer beekeepers. A lot of them are coming in from southern Italy, and that's where all the kind of panic about small hive beetle goes, because the Italians are being very Italian about it. They started off the first year or so after the sort of outbreak in southern Italy, really kind of going to town, and they put all the investigation in and all the reporting and all that sort of stuff. And the numbers were creeping up year and year up, and they sort of dealt with some outbreaks. I mean, they were trying, and then they gave up. and you look at the stats they produce these days, and it's kind of like, well, you're just not looking. So it's not surprising you're not finding, because you've stopped looking. And the underreporting was what the Italian beekeepers were doing, because they were getting compensated. They were waiting until the end of the season, until they either sold everything or got the honey crop off it, and then when the option was to get them through winter, they suddenly put their hand out and go, I think we've got a small hive beetle. Can we have some compensation, please, if you kill our colonies, so we don't have to get them through winter? They were milking the system a bit.
But it's boiling down to money, isn't it? People want to make profit, whether it's through compensation or commercial beekeepers, or even smaller beekeepers want to make a bit of quick bucks.
And nuke colonies have sort of historically been fairly small into this country. It's a big thing, package bees in the States, but nukes and packages in the UK has never been really much. So quite why sort of Patrick Murphy has decided this is the best year to kind of nail his colours to the mast. But I suspect it as a businessman, he's probably not doing himself a lot of it, because the Irish are going absolutely bonkers at the moment, because they think all the bees are going to get imported into Ireland. He's not going to be able to ship them into England, because DEFRA will block him. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They'll find a way of doing it, and all these bees are going to get dumped in Ireland. And the Irish black bee lobby makes the kind of British lot look possibly sort of quite mild. They're pretty, because they've been doing it for a long time. There's some lovely little bee groups over there, but they're sort of pretty serious guys. I wouldn't want to mess with them.
It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. So I mean, like, there's a big campaign, isn't there, for people who want to buy dogs and puppies to not go to like unlicensed breeders, go to a cat and dog shelter first. And generally, the wider public were aware with all these campaigns. Maybe there needs to be a campaign to prospective new beekeepers saying, well, be careful where you're getting your bees from, and be aware. Because until you, like all things, you can't know until you know.
Well, especially if you do it up here. I mean, sort of if you buy something that's got Southern European stock, because you bought it early in the year and things like that, or because they got sold to you. Winters up here can be really mean, and I always feel sorry for beekeepers who kind of they buy from that area and they get through their first year, and the first winter they tank. They beat themselves up because they think they did something wrong, and honestly, they probably didn't. They probably just kind of they might have done everything that they needed to right, but you know,
Yeah,
not with
but
that
these
kind
weren't
of
suited.
not with those bees, which is a shame. It's sort of,
That's the last way. Do you want to turn so you're facing rather than at an angle, bud? Because you might get a sore neck facing
will
like
I
that.
be able to screen share? Do you think?
I'll stop. I'll
Yeah.
stop. Hi
I
everyone.
mean, just when you're ready, and not from now, but just
Yeah.
you know, if you could,
We haven't quite got everybody, but hello, Fran and Simon and Michael and Ian, Adam and Rachel, and Zita, here's Paul.
Really? You mate once and then you explode. You explode. If you manage to get to the end of the season, the female's ejected from the hive and you die because of the cold.
Oh
Dishing out the bee facts there, Michael.
Yeah, I've come in today and there's another member of staff here, so I'm just explaining it and stuff.
Oh, so you've come in just so you wouldn't miss the session?
Yeah.
Grand. No, good to have you. Really good to have you. We'll give it another couple of minutes. We've joined us, put a message out saying that Ian Campbell, he's not called Annette. Ian Campbell's here from the local association. I was talking last week about the importance of joining an association. So Ian's just going to reinforce what I was talking about. We're going to give a couple of more minutes, well, about 2 more minutes, if that's okay, to see if anybody else does join. But again, as last week, I'm recording this. I'll more than likely do a little edit of the session this morning, just to share with other people that might be interested in doing things like this or getting into bees. If you don't want to be part of that, just say I can not make you part of that. But more importantly, if you need to leave early, if you've missed a session, if you want to think, all right, I missed that bit, let us listen again. And there's going to be, I'll share the full recording with you all.
Top stuff.
We'll just give another minute or so. I'll check my messages or my emails, make sure any ones. See, and I'm stuck. Nothing on WhatsApp. Email. Dun, dun, dun. Thanks as well for logging in on a bank holiday. I suppose with lockdowns, it's hard to keep up with when it's a bank holiday and when it's a normal day or even a Wednesday. So thanks for committing. It's appreciated. Cool, we'll not wait too long. I'll just keep an eye on the waiting room. Otherwise, we could just be sat. We could be waiting all day, couldn't we? So yes, as I said before, I've invited along Ian Campbell. He's a chairperson from the Newcastle District Beekeepers Association. Also, he is the news editor of the BKA magazine. I mentioned last week, another good resource is joining the, through your association, you'll have a subscription to the British Beekeepers Association, and they release a magazine every month. Ian is a news editor of that. Very humble guy, yet a very, very experienced beekeeper. But I'll just hand you over. If you can, please put your mic on mute. Just so we can...
Hi folks, good morning. Thank you ever so much, Dougie. It's lovely to be here and cheers for inviting us along. As Dougie says, sort of you getting an introduction to beekeeping, that's fantastic, and it's lovely to see that. Where we kind of step in is we're a local beekeeping association, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we work, how we link up to the National Association, and kind of what we do. Sorry for death by PowerPoint, but sometimes it's kind of, it just gets a few facts and figures across. If you've got any questions, just feel free to shout out as we go along. Dougie, I'm not sure I can screen share at the moment because I'm disabled. Are we able to?
I think I need to make you a co-host. I'll do that. Dun, dun, dun. Make co-host.
Real thanks. I'm glad you know how to do that. I'm gonna have to learn how to do that.
That should work.
Yeah, looking good.
Cool.
Has that worked? Can you see?
Yeah.
Just let me pull it full screen. Okay, so this is us, Newcastle District Beekeepers, and we've been going for nearly a century. It's our centenary next year, and we really need to start making some plans what we're going to do. But everything's kind of got interrupted over the last year, funnily enough. So we're a little association. There's about 100 members, and we cover a patch down to Sunderland, up towards Morpeth, and up the Tyne Valley a section. Annick beekeepers pick up to the north, Hexham beekeepers pick up to sort of the west, and Durham beekeepers pick up to the south of us, and there's blurry edges around. Most local associations are affiliated to a national group, and that's the British Beekeepers Association. So it just works that they're a big group and we're part of their big group. If you join us, you're automatically joined into the BBKA. That's just the way we work. So about 2/3 of your membership fee to us goes directly to them. And what that provides you with, well, provide the sort of local services, but nationally they provide you with something that's really important, which is public liability insurance. Depending where you're keeping your bees, unfortunately we live in a bit of a litigious society these days. Bees can sting. Very often the first thing you're asked if you go to someone and they say, hey, can we keep some bees on this site, is yeah, have you got insurance? So that it gives you 10 million quid's worth of public liability insurance. It's not the only reason to be part of the association, but you know what, and it also gives you product insurance. So if you are selling honey, or you are selling sort of other, it's raw materials, so wax and honey and things like that. It wouldn't be soaps and things. But if you're selling raw products from the hive, it will cover those, insure you for those as well. BBKA has got a framework of training to train beekeepers on to fairly high levels. As Dougie said, they produce a magazine, which I work for, and they do various national training things, and they have an annual convention, which is normally in April. So that's a little bit about us and how we link up with them. For us, we meet once a month in the evenings, and we've got a new home just recently at the Newcastle Cat and Dog Shelter, which is on Benton Lane, Long Benton. And I've just been up early this morning moving some of our colonies onto our new apiary site there that you can see in the bottom corner. So it was 5 o'clock start this morning, so I'm gonna have some breakfast after this. So we meet there in the evening, and those are kind of speaker-led meetings. And what our speaker meetings do is we've got a main topic for that evening, and it can be across the board. Over the last year, we've been doing everything by Zoom because we just haven't been able to meet face to face. Kind of hoping we'll get back to meeting again by July, but let's see how we go. And really, the whole point of it is someone talks on a topic that they're relatively expert at. They may be local, they may be sort of from the area. We've got good tie-ups with the local universities, and we know most of the local beekeepers in the area. We've got some very, very experienced beekeepers in this area, and it's always good to hear from them. But like Dougie's talking this month, and I think some of you may be coming along to that, we also want to get people who are newer in beekeeping and have quite a bit of experience, but are at a different end of the spectrum, because people have different perspectives. There's no point listening all the time to people who've been keeping bees for 20 years when you've been keeping bees for a couple of weeks, because they'll be off on directions that you might struggle to keep up with. So you need a whole spectrum of people talking to you, and beekeeping is lifelong learning. You learn over a fair period of time. So when the main speaker's finished, that's about 3/4 of an hour or so. Everyone has a cup of tea, coffee, whatever you want, and then we get a chance to talk to each other. Beekeepers need a little network. It's lovely to be able to chat over with a bunch of other people who share the same slightly bonkers hobby of what you've been doing, whatever you want to chat about. And we talk through about a few seasonal tips about what's going on that particular time of year. So it's pretty informal, and we'll hopefully be kicking those off again face to face in July. As I say, we're running them on Zoom at the moment. Apiary meetings, beekeeping, as you'll find out with Dougie, there's the theory side to it, but there's also the practical side is really important. So we don't do a beginner's course at the moment, although we may do in the future. But what we do is when people have done some sort of beginner's course, ideally, is those people still need to gain some practical experience. So we've got a couple of training apiaries. Again, they've been on hold for the last year. We hope to get them up and running. And those we will go through various colonies we've got there. And we'll go through it once a month during the year, more often sometimes if we're doing specific training. And we'll just show, if you want to come along, work out what's going on, see how other people do things. It's useful. Have somebody there to kind of go, have you thought about this when you're doing that? is there a reason for that, or maybe would that be an option? It's just to flag up some of the options, because when you're looking through a hive, the hive's telling you a little story, you read the little story, and then you know what you should hopefully be doing. So we'll help and support candidates through, after a year, often beekeepers think about taking a thing called a basic assessment, which is a little test. It's a bit like your cycling proficiency. You take it with an experienced beekeeper, and that's, you get a lovely certificate, and it's worthwhile doing because it gives you a lot of confidence. There are a whole range of beekeeping assessments and exams beyond that. Some of our beekeepers have been through those, and we can help and support you along the way. We do a whole bunch of outreach work. Part of our kind of charitable constitution is that we're there to educate beekeepers, but we're also there to educate the public. So we go out to schools, we go out to fairs, events and stuff like that. And we take our observation hive if we possibly can, which is a glass-walled hive, and we just chat to the public. And it's a lovely thing to do. And you just spend all day yakking about bees. It's always good if there's 3 or 4 of us there, because as soon as, especially kids, as soon as they see a box full of bees, they're kind of, most of them are in there. There's a few that are kind of going, I don't want to be anywhere near that, but most of them are really. So it's lovely doing that outreach work. And you suddenly start to make that connection back with people who maybe lost a little bit of touch with nature. So other work we do, we will help other beekeepers, and we do mentoring. We've got some ways of doing that. We'll collect swarms of public service. People get really frightened by bee swarms. Actually, they're not that terrifying, and they can be collected often fairly simply. So we offer a public service to do that, and we can do bespoke training for groups if we're asked to. We've got a reasonable social media presence. Our website's a bit shite, to be perfectly honest. Our Facebook page is our main communication tool. In the last year or so, we've got WhatsApp up and running, because we found that over lockdown, a lot of beekeepers wanted to natter, and they nattered more on WhatsApp. So, and we've, over the last year, when we haven't been able to meet face to face to do practical sessions, we filmed a load of them and put them up on YouTube, including some sort of real beginners sessions, to just try and give people what we couldn't do face to face. So those are all out there and exist. We also were quite concerned about a pest that's coming into this country and trying to stop it or slow it down, called Asian hornets. So we also got a little Asian hornet team who, should they come into this area, we will use to try and support the National Bee Unit with identification of things like that. So we are a little group. It has a membership. The membership runs with the calendar year. It's about 30 quid to join us as a full member, but that's a member who's got bees. And if you haven't got bees and things like that, it's about half that price. It's a whole range of membership categories. We've got a membership secretary who will help you. We've got our website, we've got our email. Contact us, and it's pretty simple and easy to join up. And as I say, the 3 key bits of advice that often get given to new beekeepers are: get some training, you're there, join the association, and get yourself a really good book. And something like the Haynes Beekeeping Manual can be, there are various other books, but that's the one that a lot of people gravitate to, and I can see why. And that's pretty much it from me. Thank you very much for your time this morning. If you've got any questions, happy to answer now. Or if Dougie wants to crack on, you've got our email addresses, or Dougie can fire questions to me, or I'm happy to hang around, whichever you prefer.
Thanks so much, Ian. I really appreciate your time, especially considering you've been up since 5:30 this morning, sorting out your new apron. So Ian's obviously explained that really well. But again, we can't reinforce and say enough the importance of joining the association. It's like a free resource to get all this information, build your network of beekeepers, and also supporting what NDBKA do, what the association do. Obviously, the subscription to them, it does cost a little bit, but you're getting like things like insurance against like BDI, which we'll talk about. You're getting your subscription to the BBKA magazine, but also you're financially supporting an association to continue to support new beekeepers and existing beekeepers, which, as Ian said at the start, has been going on for many, many years. Great. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to ask Ian anything? Because he's got loads of knowledge. Let's use them.
Yeah, you'll catch me out though. I mean, beekeeping is a lovely thing. I really hope you have a nice time doing it. What we try and do as much as anything is, we've noticed over time that sometimes people, you can start beekeeping these days by half a dozen clicks on your keyboard, and you've got the stuff, everything coming from the supplies. You've got the bees, the hive, and everything. If you haven't got the training to go alongside that, it's a bit like Dougie was talking a bit. It's funny we've ended up at a cat and dog shelter, because there are parallels. The number of people we see who start beekeeping, they're really enthusiastic about it, but then it doesn't quite pan out the way they hope to in the first couple of years, and then people sort of tend to drift away, especially if their bees don't make it. What we try and do is we try and step in and just try and soften that process up. So when there are moments, and there will be moments, you stand looking at hive going, I have no idea what is going on here. Who or hell can I call to give us a hand? That's where we hopefully step in, because, and it will happen to all of us. I was working with a hive last year, and in the end I virtually gave up on it and did some really kind of daft things that I would never thought of normally, because I'd run out of options. I had no idea what was going on, and I should know. So that's hopefully what we can do.
You don't want to ask any questions now, but you think of something later, pop them towards me and I can send them on to Ian and get a response. But again, really appreciate your time, and we'll keep on talking about the Newcastle District Beekeepers Association. It's been one of the best resources that I've found for beekeeping.
Thank you, Dougie.
Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers. Thanks. Cheers, man. I'll crack on with our presentation, guys. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate that last week we all met, but there are a few new faces this week. Fran's joined us and Sarah's joined us. Hello, guys. I put everybody on the spot early on last week and asked everyone to do a little introduction. You don't have to, but if you want to do a little introduction, it was basically what's your name, where do you come from, what's your interest in bees. If you want to, Fran.
I'll do it. So my name's Frances. I live in Newcastle. And I've been volunteering at the Meadows since about 2017. And I remember when I got there and the bees were gone and I was gutted. I was like, oh, I wish I had bees there. And then Dougie came along and installed his bees, and I've just always really wanted to learn it. I love things that are like, growing your own food and like being involved in your own production of things that we use every day. I think it's just so satisfying, and that's why I want to learn something like beekeeping. Yeah, that's it.
Nice. It's lush to have you here. And yeah, you did actually come along 2 years ago, not last year, the year before, and to join us for an inspection, which was great.
Yeah, it was really
more of that this year. Sarah's also joined us, but Sarah at the moment does not have a microphone or a camera. Sarah's going to use the chat box if she's got any questions or comments. But maybe in the next few weeks, or when we meet outside, we can all meet her and say hello. So on behalf of everybody, hello, Sarah. Crack on with the presentation. Again, just like last week, stop us anytime if you want to ask, if you want to make a comment. Yeah, there's no daft questions, there's no daft people, there's no daft answers, there's no daft comments. Just interrupt, because otherwise it's going to be me talking for 2 hours, which I'll happily do. Or I can talk all day if you want us to. But this is your session as well as mine. Dun, dun, dun. I'm sharing my screen. There we go. How do I get onto the next slide? So yes, we've just heard from Ian, the chairperson of NDBA, the Beekeepers Association Newcastle, and news editor of BB here. He's got so much knowledge. He was the first person that allowed me to come and open a beehive with him. I joined him in the association in April. And he just works tirelessly to help other beekeepers. Little recap of last week's session. I shared the Zoom recording for the people that didn't make it along or had to leave early, and maybe have had a chance to catch up on what you missed, or maybe people who were part of the full session and just wanted to have a little look at what was going on and like kind of recap themselves. So if you want to chime in, if you want to chip in and maybe contribute and say something or some things that you remember from last week, or some little bee facts. I heard Michael telling somebody else some bee facts before. If you want to, just unmute yourself and tell us what we learned last week.
I learned a little fact about education on bees, and that people don't know what a bee looks like. My mum is who I'm talking about, and there was a bumblebee in the garden, like, and she says, "Oh, look, there's what you're doing, Paul." I says, "No, it's not," you know. And I showed her the picture of the bee manual with the honeybee, and she didn't even know it was a bee. She didn't.
Yeah.
You know, she said, "That's not a bee."
You know what, Paul, right? It's really interesting that you say that, because in the next couple of weeks, spring's going to really hit and bees are going to start swarming. And as Ian said earlier, a lot of the association stuff is like helping people with bee swarms. And people will call you and be like, I've got a bee swarm, I've got loads of bees in my garden. And a lot of the calls, at first, you're just trying to figure out whether there are actually honeybees, because people are calling about either bumblebees, of which is like maybe more than 50 species in the UK, or it might be a mining bee, or it might even be a couple of flies, or even just sometimes we get a call and there's like 3 honeybees on a flower or a plant. And people are like, there's a swarm, come help this, I'm gonna get stung. And then you sometimes get down there and there's 3 bees, and you're like, how here? I'm traveling all the way down here. But a lot of it is like, but it is interesting. That a lot of people, until you do these sorts of things, you can't tell the difference between a honeybee, a bumblebee, a mining bee. Yeah, it's good to hear you picked up that book as well. I love that book, The Haynes Manual. Does anybody? Whoops, carry on, Paul.
I was just saying, yeah, it's a nice book. It's worth reading. Yeah.
Does anybody remember any like parts of the hive? We're starting off looking at the national beehive. Other hives are available. Does anyone remember any parts? The names of the parts of that hive?
Brood box.
Brood box, smashing. That's the biggest box, the deep box. The nest box is where all the hive activity happens, where all the eggs are and the brood. What else we got?
There's the super.
Yes, the super. That's where all that sticky honey is, eh? It's above the brood box, Latin for above. And does anyone remember what's in between the brood box and the super?
I don't know what the proper name, but the divider. Stop the
divider. Yeah.
Yeah, the queen excluder. It excludes the queen. The gaps in there are too narrow. Worker bees can get through it. The queen can't get through it. Yeah. Then we looked at tools that would take down the apiary. Your most important tool, obviously, is your suit. Somebody just said something there that rhymes with walker. Yeah.
Smoker.
Smoker. So we're using that while we're doing inspections and working with the bees. Any other tools?
Just your hive tool.
Yeah.
Aye. To crack open the boxes, separate the boxes. Then we looked at typically what we're going to see inside of a hive. And there were 3 types or castes of bees. What were the 3 types of bees?
Drones.
Drones.
Worker bees.
Worker bees.
And the queen.
And the queen. Smashing. I think that's where we left it, wasn't it? Yeah, that's where we left it. Let's just crack on. Does anybody else want to say anything? No. Okay. Yes, last week again we looked at the different cells and we looked at what might be inside those cells, and we figured out that there were eggs inside of there, and some of the cells were capped off and they were deemed to be workers because it was a fertile egg. They were deemed to be drones because it was a non-fertile egg, or they were going to be made into a queen, and those cells look different. So what I've got here on this slide is a development from egg until they emerge. So for start, on the far left-hand side, this is day 1, and there's a nice sort of picture of the queen pushing her abdomen in the bottom of the cell, and she lays an egg. On day 1, to get into a hive and you see eggs at the bottom of the cells, these eggs are standing up, upright, because the queen's managed to put her abdomen right down there. So day 1 is an egg. And this top line is deemed to be, it's going to be a worker. So she's laying a fertile egg. This egg remains such for 3 days. And on the 3rd day, it kind of falls over. So when you're looking in the hive, you're looking at the cell and the eggs falling over, that's indicative that the egg's been there for 3 days. The egg then kind of hatches, but bees don't hatch on day 3. And then for 6 days, it's in the larvae stage. That's where it looks like a little maggot. And it's twisting and turning It's eating some food. It's transforming into a bee. So 3 days an egg, 6 days it's a larvae, and then it gets capped off. It's sealed. We looked last week at like the cells being sealed, and it was like a biscuity brown color. It's sealed up when it's in like the pupae stage, and again it's just transforming into a bee. On day 21, the worker emerges, puts its way out with the cell, and it's off to be a worker bee. Again, we talked about the worker bees. They're the females, and they do everything inside of the hive. And they're assigned roles depending on how old they are, depending on the pheromones that the queen's releasing. There might be nurse bees, there might be feeding the queen and rearing brood, or there might be cleaning cells. Once a cell's being used to produce a bee, worker bees can come and clean that cell so the queen can lay in it again. There might then be assigned roles like to be a forager or a guard bee and to defend the hive. We're going to look at that in a couple of slides' time. And the next section looks at it's the transformation of a drone. So again, every bee starting the same. It's an egg in the bottom of the cell. The difference here is that the queen's putting in a non-fertile egg. Also, the queen's going to be using cells which are slightly wider, and the cells are slightly wider than a worker. So we can see that it remains an egg for 3 days. It then becomes a larvae, and then it's not capped off until day 10. And then look, it emerges on day 24. So it's remained inside the cell much longer than a worker bee. I touched on the topic and I mentioned last week that there's a parasite, a little bug that goes inside of a beehive called a destructor mite. And they actually breed on a developing drone. And they've chosen the development drone because the drones are present and they're capped off for longer. So instead of using a worker bee, which isn't capped off for as long as a drone, they use a drone. And that's the way that the mites sort of reproduce inside of the hive. The two mating pairs will be in 2 mating mites will be inside of that capped cell. And then we look at the last section, which is a queen. So the queen's laid an egg, a fertile egg. And if you notice this diagram, it's like kind of upside down. And it remains the egg for three days, just like everything else. And then the diet's changing. The diet's different between a queen, what's going to be destined to be a queen and a worker. The cell is drawn out. Instead of capped off, it's drawn out. So it looks a bit like a peanut on the frames. And yeah, that queen transforms, it's capped off. She transforms to a queen, and she's emerging on day 16. You'll come back to this. We'll learn it as we go. You don't need to remember it all, but it is kind of important to have an awareness, particularly to have an awareness of this. The queen here, it's an egg. The hive's decided that's going to be a queen, and it's capped off around day 7, 8. Around day 7 and 8. And that's why, as beekeepers, we go in and we inspect every week. Because we want to get there. If there's any queen cells, we want to get there before that cell's capped off, before it's sealed. So we're inspecting every 7 days or so. If you leave your inspections 9 or 10 days, as you can see, the queen cell's already being capped off. And when we talked about queen cells last week, and kind of saying when you see a queen cell, you need to split. There is a time when splitting is too late, which we're going to go on to next. So we'll look at this diagram again. I pulled it from the Irish Beekeepers Association. So if you just Google life cycle of a bee, you'll find this diagram in many different forms in many different places. Like some people refer to it as bee maths, knowing when the egg's going to be capped off, when it's going to be a pupa and whatnot. I've got a little video from the National Geographic, and they've actually managed to show you the transformation. They use a drone. It's amazing. We'll watch it together. Flush. Share sound. Optimize video clip. Do that one. Do this one. Dun, dun, dun. And it's entitled Amazing Time Lapse. It is amazing. Can everyone see like a YouTube video about a player?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see what happens.
Here is a bee egg as it hatches into a larva. Those newly hatched larvae swim around their cells, feeding on a liquid food that nurse bees secrete for them. Then their head and their legs start to differentiate as they transform into pupae.
You can't see the picture.
Yeah, the video's not playing, I don't think.
Okay,
It's just a black screen.
Yeah, we can hear the
that's no
sound.
good. Let me try a different method.
Maybe if you're doing full screen it or something, I don't know.
When I full screen that, I decided I didn't want to play. Share sound. Can you see the YouTube video there?
Not yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that American voice and
Mine's just got like a spinning wheel saying that you started screen sharing, but there's nothing loaded.
if it doesn't work, we're going to just not use. Zoom really didn't like that. Just restarted for me. Share sound. Screen. Sorry, guys.
Try playing it like don't full screen it, see if it works.
Okay, can you see the screen there, the YouTube screen?
Yeah, and we can see the
Here
image
is a
now.
bee egg as it hatches into a larva.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Koshi.
Those newly hatched larvae swim around their cells, feeding on a liquid food that nurse bees secrete for them. Then their head and their legs start to differentiate as they transform into pupae. Here's that same pupation process seen from above with varroa mites running around in the cells.
Is that rolling?
Next, the tissue reorganizes in their body and the pigment slowly develops in their eyes. In the last step, their skin shrivels up and they sprout hair.
Pretty intense music that as well, eh? Did you see the part as well when they were inside? There was like the little varroa mites.
Yeah.
So these mites are like, if they were comparable to being on a human, they'd probably be the size of like a dinner plate, like a typical dinner plate, attached to your body like, all the time. And while during the winter, it's not, they'll have like a brood break, so there's no brood, there's no drone brood, there's no worker brood, or sometimes it's very little. So the varroa are present on just the live bees. So especially in the early inspections, when you're looking at bees, you can see the varroa mite actually on the bees when they're going about the business. Otherwise, during the main parts of the season, inside the drone brood, that's where they can reproduce. And sometimes in the spring, you'll think, oh, there's only a couple of mites. I haven't got much of a problem. Then before you know it, once drones start being produced, the mite population explodes. And that's the importance of having, I think, the mesh floor we talked about last week. You can have a solid floor or a mesh floor. The mites are going to drop when they do die, and they'll drop down through the mesh floor, and then you can see how many mites you've got, how much of a problem it is. So you need to have an awareness of the varroa mite and kind of how to stop them and how to combat them. There's lots of different methods which we can talk about as weeks go by. I just want to kind of introduce them to you now. You can use harsh chemicals, you can do drone culling. Some people just are sure that bees can like naturally fight this virus and do things themselves, but that's probably going to take up a full session, so I won't go into it. Research in your own time or wait for me to do a session on it. But we do need to be just aware of them. Nasty little things. Dun, dun, dun. I suppose they won't see themselves as that though. They've all got their place in life. So here's just a little slide just talking a bit more about the varroa destructor. So it arrived in 1992. there's a big argument and debate about how they actually arrived in the UK. A lot of people think it's because of the importation of bees and the importation of queens that they managed to bring themselves in through that. Some people think it's from the importation and the like the sharing of flowers and whatnot. However they got here, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the varroa is here and in pretty much every beehive in the UK. They cause deformed wing virus. So when you're looking at bees, you can see some bees that have like got knackered wings. It looks like the wings have been torn. And then it also leads to chronic bee paralysis virus, which ultimately is going to lead to your colony to collapse and your full colony to die out. So if you notice your mites, if the mite count's getting high, you need to do something about it. What you do about it, there's like loads of different methods. Do what you choose is best. I'll talk about what I do another time. They feed off the hemolymph, which is essentially invertebrate blood. Invertebrates don't have blood; they've got like hemolymph, and they feed off that on the bees. The reproducing drone brood, which is what I talked about when we saw before, drone brood sealed for the longest. Some beekeepers have reported it hasn't reached far northern Scotland, and they say that they don't have varroa as a problem. And in the past like 2 weeks, Scotland now said that varroa mite is now a reportable disease in beehives. In England, if you have like European foul brood or American foul brood, you need to report that. DEFRA says so. It's a notifiable disease. Varroa at the moment is not, but in Scotland it's now lawful. It's part of it. You need to tell them when you got varroa mite because they don't want it getting to the northern parts of Scotland, obviously. So yeah, so it's vital. You need to know it's there. There are other diseases, there are other pests which we're going to talk about in weeks to come, but varroa is the main one which we need to be aware of. We looked at this last week, but here it is again. It's the drone brood compared to worker brood. See the drone, how it's like a domed, it kind of sticks out from the frame, whereas worker brood doesn't. It's kind of flat, more of a biscuity brown. The same color, yeah, is on the drone brood, but here's the worker brood on the right hand side. It's more flat, and you're going to find the worker brood like all in the same place, in the middle of the hive, and the bees are working it and whatnot. And the drones usually just scattered around, so there might be a patch of drone brood in some places, but it's not as methodical. It's just kind of scattered around. And then queen cups and charged queen cups and queen cells. We talked last week about queen cells. When an egg's destined to be a queen, it doesn't just get capped off like a worker bee. It kind of like gets drawn out, and it eventually looks like a bit like a peanut. So in a hive, right, when we open a hive, we're going to see loads of what's on the far left-hand side, what we call a queen cup. That's fine. Bees are going to make them nearly all the time. I like to just think of it as the bees are just practicing, they're playing. As humans, before we do things, I suppose, we just play, we'll drop balls, we'll throw things just to practice and to play. And the bees kind of put up cups all the time to play. So we expect to see them. The middle picture is a bit more of a better indication of what it looks like. It's coming off the frame, it's protruding. And the last picture, right, it's quite difficult to see. But the difference in that is that inside, you can kind of see like a creamy substance in the little pupae. So there's an egg being inside of that, and it's turned into a larvae. Sorry, so that's when it's danger. The bees are preparing to swarm. First two pictures, you see these, it's fine. You see queen cups in every hive, but if you look inside of them and you see like a creamy thing or a little egg, or it is now turned to a larvae, they're going to swarm. It's time to do something about it. The best bit of advice, especially for your first couple of years, if you see what we'll call a charged queen cell with an egg inside of it, split, do an artificial split, so the bees think that they've swarmed. Some people will be telling you, and it can work, but it isn't as effective, that you can just get rid of the queen cup, the charged queen cell, you can destroy it, give more space, and the bees will just carry on. But really, once the bees get that kind of swarm behavior in them, and they've got that intent behind them, they will eventually swarm, and you're going to lose your bees. If you do decide just to get rid of the charged queen cell and the charged queen cup and kind of take your chances and think that the bees aren't going to swarm, make sure you're back in that hive within 7 days so you can see whether they've made new intentions and new queen cells. Usually the bees will only start with an egg, but sometimes they will start with a larvae. So instead of starting from day 1, they might start from like day 6. But if you see a charged queen cup, split your bees, do an artificial swarm, and you're less likely to lose your bees. Swarm cells versus supersedure. So as well as these cells, okay, they're on the bottom of the frames, and there's going to be about 10 to 20 of them if the bees are going to swarm. That's how it's kind of indicative of a swarm cell. If you just find one cell in the middle of a frame, amongst the whole hive, you've only found one in the middle, it's likely that it's a supersedure, and that means that they're just going to produce a new queen. We talked about it last week, where there's usually one queen in a hive, there's sometimes 2, because when a queen gets old or if she's ineffective, the bees think, right, we need to produce a new queen. So they just put up one queen cup, which becomes one queen cell, which means supersedure. So it's in the maths, there's only one, it's going to be supersedure. If you open your hive and you're going through and you find 10 up to 20 queen cells or charged queen cups, they're going to swarm. That's a preparation to swarm. So again, an assessment needs to be made. Can you even split, or have they swarmed? If you do come in and you find what we looked at 2 slides ago, there was the little queen cup. It was quite small, and then it was charged. It's going to be drawn out. Again, it looks like a little peanut hanging off a frame. And if you look inside of that, and you can still see like a creamy substance, and you can still see the larvae, which looks a bit like a maggot. It hasn't been capped off yet, and the bees probably haven't swarmed. So you've got time to do an artificial swarm. If you look underneath this and there's nothing inside, it means that the queen has emerged out of you and your bees have already swarmed. The most likely your bees have already swarmed and you've missed it. If it's capped off, it's been sealed, and you can't see inside, your bees have probably already swarmed. So you need to get there before, what I'm explaining is that you need to get there before it's capped off, before it's sealed. You can split, you're probably going to save your bees. If it's been sealed, they've probably already swarmed. But keep on looking through, because sometimes they haven't swarmed yet. It's an interesting / infuriating and frustrating thing about bees. What it says to the book and what we've learned and we know about bees isn't always how the bees behave. So just because your manual says this is what bees do, or just because Dougie says this, or just because Ian or somebody else tells you this, it isn't always true. Bees do what they want to do, really. We're just trying to understand the behaviors and work with them. So in essence, you open your beehive, you're seeing queen cups, don't panic, it's all right. They're always putting up queen cups, and they're just playing with it. If you find a queen cup with a little egg in it or a creamy substance, playtime's over. They're not playing anymore. They are going to either supersedure or swarm to do something about it, split. If you found these big peanuts hanging off the side of a frame and hidden in places sometimes, you might be too late. If it's sealed off, you're too late, they've already swarmed. If it's not sealed, there's still time to split. Yeah.
So Dougie, is this why you put the colours on the queen bees? So if you notice that they're producing one of the queen cells and your bee is 2 years old, 2.5 years old, the likelihood is they're just producing another one, so you don't need to worry about it swarming.
Yeah, that can be another indicator. That's a good point. So if you know how old your queen is, that's another kind of reason to think, oh, it's maybe supersedure. But the most telling sign, Simon and Michael, is that there's just one queen cell. If they're going to supersedure, there won't be 2, there won't be 3, there won't be 4, there'll be 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So again, last week, we were interested in like how to do a split, and I used the whiteboard to kind of draw out how to do a split. And I maybe didn't explain it too well. So I've got a couple of videos here just explaining this split, which the most common one's the Pagden method. That's what I explained last week. So I'm going to be brave again and try another video. See if this works. Share sound, share that one. How do I get rid of that taskbar? Cool. A nice little tune as well. Is that playing for you guys? Can you hear the guitar on that?
Yeah, I can.
So that hive there, you've went into a hive, you started inspecting it, and there's queen cells. So the Q represents the queens in the hive, plus QC is queen cells. There's a vital bit of information there as well. You've removed the queen excluder. Whenever you remove a queen excluder, you check that the queen's not underneath it. So if she is and you put it on the floor, you've lost her. So last week I explained that like you've got your hive, there's the queen cells, you found queen cells. So you're going to go for that hive and take the queen out, put her in a new hive and put it in the position of the original hive. What they've done is they've moved the hive first, and now they're finding the queen from the original hive, and they're taking the queen, the frame out, which has got the queen on, making sure there's no queen cells, and they're putting that in a new, fresh hive in the original position. So the queen is essentially staying in the same position, but you've moved the rest of the hive somewhere else. At the end there as well, there's been another movement at the hives, yeah? They have moved the hive that was on the right-hand side to the left of it, and that kind of like bleeds off new bees. That's like a variation of the Pagden split. Barely anybody does that last movement of moving the hive again. It's supposed to bleed off some of the new flying bees. Also, the existing, when they moved, if I can't take it back there, this is not going to work. Wow. Also, when they do, when they first like took the queen out and put her in a new box, that video was said to leave 2 queen cells, so then a queen can emerge. And the theory behind that, if there's 2 queen cells and there's 1 queen that emerges, she's going to go around, she's going to kill the queen that's still in a cell. There's a risk there though. If a queen emerges, what they might do is they might swarm because they know there's another queen remaining. So a lot of beekeepers suggest taking down all the queen cells and leaving just 1. And you just hope that there is actually a queen inside of that cell. And when I first started out, I did leave 2, but I did find that I was getting swarms. Because if there's 2 queens there, the hive's just going to go, all right, we may as well still swarm because there's another queen ready to emerge. So I think it's best just to get rid of all of them and just leave 1. Just leave 1 queen. We do have another video. It's from Ian, who we heard from us at the start of the talk, and he's demonstrating a Pagden split. Instead of just doing a little video, he's doing like a real live inspection. I'll see if I can get it shared. Screen share.
Rolling.
Good morning. So we're back at Summerhill.
That working, guys?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Thanks. So yeah, that's Ian in his bee suit down at the Association Apiary, and he's going to do a split, a Pagden split.
Today, and it's the 27th of April. Here today, we've been seeing signs that the colonies are growing, and I had an inkling today that we might start seeing queen cells. So we've changed our order a bit, and instead of going through the normal colony, the most likely one to want to do something was this colony number 6. Now it's a double brood box, so this morning we've been through the bottom box, we found the queen, and because I had a bad feeling about where this colony was going, as soon as we found her, we took her out on the frame she was on and we put her in a spare box. We went through the bottom box and we found some cups, lots of brood, everything okay. As we've gone through the upper box, we found queen cups, lots of them, a couple with eggs in, and we found one charged queen cell, so with royal jelly and a larvae in it. At that point, you know you've crossed a threshold. You have to do something. So we're going to do a Pagden split on this colony. We're fortunate, we found the queen really early and we've separated her out, so we haven't got all the stress of finding her again now. I'm kind of glad I did that. Sorry, smoke has gone right down my throat. So now we're going to start doing the process. The only thing that will be different about what we're doing today from what you might do is we're working with a double brood box. So when we come back in a second, we'll be reassembling the hive in the way that you would do for this manipulation.
Rolling.
So the whole principle of Pagden is you need to separate the queen and the older flying bees from the brood and the nurse bees. So at the moment, I've got the brood and nurse bees and all the bees, apart from the queen, in these boxes. So these boxes are going to move away from the original position. So first, with this bottom brood box, which is a fair weight, it's going to go onto a new stand over to the side. Whee, good morning. Need to put an extra frame in there. I'm just going to get this down fine. Back in a second. This is the frame that we took out earlier that has the queen on in a separate box. So there's that frame dropped in, and the dummy board. And I need to level this stand up because this is on a double brood box. This is the second brood box, which needs to go on top. Knock those bees' heads down. On with the second box. So this is basically the original hive, minus the queen.
In a new position.
Queen excluder on. This colony's had 2 supers. It's got great stores in it. I'm going to put 1 super on this. Because I've got 2 supers, I'm going to put 1 super on each. Often in the diagrams, it'll tell you to put all the honey on that one. But because I've got 2, I'm going to do it like this.
Again, a good example of you don't always beekeep to the books. There's different ways to do it. You don't have to do it rigidly to what your manual tells you or what you've been taught. So Ian's taken the nurse bees and the brood, and they're in a new position, which is what we're.
That needs a roof on it, but we'll worry about that in a minute. Over here, this is the original site. This is where the new colony is going to get assembled. And all the flying bees, because this has always been home, are going to come home. So you can pick up the entrance block. floor now. What I did at the start of the process, because we handily found the queen really early, was popped her into a box that I had ready and waiting, because I thought this was going to happen. So the queen is in this box on one frame that I pulled out of the other colony. I chucked it in at the edge so it'd be easy to find. I don't really want it at the edge anymore. I want it nice and central. And I also need to check there's absolutely no chance of any queen cells on this frame. Because if there is, you haven't really achieved anything. And when we're doing this, we'll have a look and see if we can still see the queen on here.
There she is.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we've got the queen here.
Marked.
We know she's still there. She's on a frame of sealed brood, which is great. There are no queen cells on that frame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've used a mixture of foundation and drawn comb in here. That frame's a bit yucky, so I might just move that couple of frames out and swap them over. It's a bit of a messy one. Just going to assemble it with the best stuff I've got. You could use just foundation, but I'm going to mix it up here, so I've got a little bit of everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Need a dummy board. I'll sort that out in a second. Crown board on for a moment while I just stop and think. Queen excluder. 2 seconds while I grab a dummy board. Dummy board's in. And as I say, I've got a super off that other one, which has got a lot of honey in it, and I'm going to pop that one on there, partly to draw out the comb in that bottom box. The bees are going to need energy to do it. I could put feed on, but I've given them a good honey supply. The other precaution you can do when you do this is if you're worried about that bottom box absconding, you can put a queen excluder for a couple of days only between the floor and the brood box, and then take it out. If you're doing it on foundations, that sometimes stops them going, hang on, we don't like it here, and leaving. I haven't done that here because I've got some drawn foundation. And that's the Pagden swarm.
Yeah, so again, Ian's just explaining pretty clearly there, again, how to do a Pagden split, a Pagden swarm. I'll just usually refer to it just as a split. We need to do a split. There's other methods to do that. There's other methods to do swarm control, but the Pagden is the easiest one. If you're, after we've talked about it last week, I've showed 2 videos there of how to do it. If you still don't remember how to do it, that's fine. I was doing research on bees before I actually kept them for a good year or so before I kept bees. And when I came to the situation where I needed to do a split, I couldn't remember how to do a split. But thankfully I had my smartphone, my mobile phone in my pocket. So I thought, right, quickly put the hive back together. I'll quickly go on YouTube, remind myself of how to do a split, and then go and do it. It's a manipulation that you're going to have to do a lot because, again, swarming is the natural cycle of a colony. Not just the beehive, it's the colony, it's how they reproduce, they split and they go and swarm. So you will be doing it a lot. There's different methods and ways to do it. Pick one that works for you. You don't have to do the Pagden split. You might choose to do a different sort of a split, which could be a shuck, where you basically shape the bees out. You could do a demery, split. There's a load of different things and ways to do it. Find what works for you. Yeah.
Dougie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So after you've done the split, do you now have 2 hives full of bees? They're both active beehives now. 2 times, you've got 2 of them.
Yeah, so the colony that you've moved to the side, yeah, that's got all of the nurse bees, like all of the young bees in.
Yeah.
It'll contain some of the flying foragers, but once they leave the hive, they'll go back to the original position where you've now put the queen. And there's going to be eggs in there, there's going to be brood in there, So they're going to like raise a new queen out of, you've knocked down all the queen cells and left one. Some people leave two, but I'll leave one. So a new queen's going to emerge. That's like a full hive. In the original position, yeah, where you've put the queen, you just left her with like one frame of brood, and you've put in either blank foundation sheets or you've put in drawn comb. So essentially that isn't a full hive. But I suppose you could argue it is. It's a colony because there's a queen and there's some bees there. What she's going to do is she's going to get laying straight away. And soon the hive will grow and expand and become a colony in its own right.
Right. So yeah, eventually you will have, when you say split, you're going to have two complete hives at some point in the future. Yeah. Okay.
I know last week as well, you were talking about like what happens if you don't want another hive. And you can either then unite the queen, the two hives, you can get rid of one of the queens and unite them. Or even some people I've heard of, they'll allow the colony which doesn't have a queen and you've taken the queen out, you allow them to start building queen cells, but you'll just keep getting rid of those queen cells. And after a week or so, you can just unite the colonies back together. I worry that they're still going to swarm, so I've never done that. Or you can use a different method called a shuck swarm. Like basically take all the big frames out of that hive and you shake them out away from the hive, and then they'll fly back into the original position and they'll think that they've swarmed. It's not something I've ever done. But again, there's like multiple different methods. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask, how often do they usually swarm? Is it like a once a year thing, or is it just dependent on, like, could they swarm twice in a year?
Definitely. They can swarm 4 times, 6 times in a year. Yeah. Some hives, like for some reason, they just want to swarm and they keep on throwing up swarm cells and you're just constantly thinking, oh, I thought I was on top of yours. Some hives I've had that haven't ever made intentions to swarm, they've never made a queen cell. So it's dead important that when summer's here, when spring's here, that you're in there every 7 days just to check.
Mm-hmm.
They won't swarm, obviously at the start of the year, they only start swarming when drones are present. So of course you need drones to mate with the queen. So in between the crucial time, I suppose, like April, May until September to get drones later on in the year because the queen can't get mated. But yeah, colony won't just swarm once or twice, they might swarm 4 times, depending on how the bees are.
Okay.
Are there any other questions about swarming? Or we're going to go over this again, okay? And all the things that we're talking about, we're going to go over while we're at the apiary. And no doubt, I don't doubt it at all, we're going to be doing the split many, many times throughout the year together. So the first time, if somebody wants to give it a bash, give it a bash. Or I can just demonstrate it and then you can try it next time. Sometimes, as I said last week as well, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. It's all about learning. I know Ian suggested when I first started to take down the apiary, like some little cards, like write all this sort of stuff down, to keep them in your pocket, like the manipulations that you need to see, that you need to do. So then you can just pull out the card. But I've always got my phone in this, so I just quickly Googled it, like most things.
You know, Dougie, if you get it wrong and the swarm off and they've gone away somewhere, would you get them back? If you know, somebody collected them, would they know, I've got this bunch of bees that belong to Paul?
Yeah.
Would that be possible?
Not really. It's finders keepers. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and it's kind of like an unwritten rule in law that if my bees are swarmed, and even if they're like on the fence of my apiary, like where I keep my bees, if another beekeeper sees that swarm, they can come up and they can collect those bees and take them away. I mean, if I was to find a swarm of bees and I knew it belonged to you, Paul, if I was walking past your apiary and I saw some bees in the fence, I would collect them. I'd probably give you a ring even before I did saying, look, Paul, your bees are swarmed, come and get your bees, and I'll give you them. But it can't be argued that, like, how can you prove that they're your bees? Sometimes bees will swarm, like, and they'll go past your apiary and just settle on your hives. But maybe because of pheromones are smelling the other bee yard. Another reason is that if you looked after your bees properly and managed them, they wouldn't have swarmed in the first place, which isn't too much of a strong argument because even the best beekeepers get swarms. But yeah, it's kind of finders keepers, losers beekeepers.
It's a cutthroat business, this beekeeping.
That really sounds so, doesn't it? But yeah, once your bees have left your hive, anybody's game. But again, I suppose it's important is trying to manage your bees the best that you can so they don't swarm. As I said last week, your bees are going to swarm. Like one of yous, or maybe all of yous out of this group, are going to go on to be fantastic beekeepers. You'll still get swarms. And if you tell us in a few years' time, Dougie, I've never had a bee swarm because I've managed them really well, I'll tell you you're a liar and tell us the truth because your bees will swarm. I've actually I was trying to find it in time for today. I'll share it next week, the week after. I've got a really good video of my first swarm when I was inspecting the bees, and I was with my mate James, and we're going for the bees, and we're like, I haven't found the queen yet. He went, Dougie, look up to your right. And there was a cluster of bees on the fence just near the hives, where the bees had swarmed. And we were like, oh no, there's bee swarm and that. And we got the phones out and he was recording it. And we're there like shoving these bees in a box, like collecting them and ready to put them in the hive. It was great. I'll try to find it and we'll go through like actual swarm collection another time. It's great fun. And again, some of that we'll probably get to do this year and do some swarm collecting together. Does anyone else want to make a comment, ask a question?
I just wanted to know, is it really bad if like nobody finds the swarm and it goes off and like goes in someone's roof, or like is that something beekeepers try to avoid, or is it okay because it just means there's more bees?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we obviously try to avoid it because we want to keep the colonies going. And if bees do end up like in a roof, it can cause damage to a house. You've then got honey dripping down walls. It can lead to some problems with the structure of the house and whatnot. And obviously, if they're inside a roof, they might then find a way inside the house, and then you've got bees inside your house, which isn't great. Because of like the climate of Britain as well, and we've got really changeable weather, most feral colonies don't survive.
Oh, right.
As highly evolved bees are, and as intelligent they are, sometimes they do choose really strange places to set up home. So you'll sometimes find the bees have swarmed and have started to like set up home on the edge of a tree, and they're hanging down a branch. And they're exposed to the elements, and before long they are going to die out, unfortunately. Also, with varroa being so present, that can just destroy a colony. There's a train of thought saying that bees can't survive without a beekeeper because they need to be managed for varroa. I don't really believe that. Bees are bees and they know what they're doing. They can yeah. I would never purposely let a swarm go. I'd always try to stop it, and if I saw a swarm, I'd always collect it and put it in a hive because I'm a beekeeper. I've got there's a video. Well, I've got a video of us like doing a ladder extraction in a house where they did actually get in the top of the bay window. The person inside the house is saying that they are nice to see now and again, but you're causing a bit of a nuisance. They had like a young child, and they were scared they were going to get stung. Yeah. That answer your question, or do you want to?
No, that's good. Yeah, I'm just curious.
Sarah's asking in the chat, do you get many people calling about bee swarms on the property? Yeah, I do. The association, obviously that Ian was talking about earlier, I'm on their swarm collectors list. So when they get an email or a phone call about it, Ian won't deal with it all himself. He'll then say, oh, call Dougie or call this person, they're a swarm collector. And I'm also on the BBKA. There's a live map. So if you find a swarm, you can go on the BBKA website, and there's a little pin in North Shields, and that's my pin. And it says like, Dougie's a beekeeper, call him, you come get your swarm. And I've got my social media side and my PR buzzing and my website. So people call us directly saying I've got a bee swarm. In the first 5-10 minutes, it's trying to ascertain whether it is a bee swarm or whether they found bumblebees or whether there's just 3 bees just chilling out on flowers and they're doing no harm. So again, with the age of smartphones, I usually say, take a picture, send it to us. I find swarm collecting really exciting because you jump in your car with all your kit and you're driving somewhere and you're like, ooh, is it going to be a prime swarm? And that means the first swarm with that mated queen. And if it is, it's a bonus because you've got yourself a viable colony to put in a hive. Or it might be a cast. So it's like a queen's emerged from her cell and she hasn't went out on a maiden flight yet. She hasn't been mated. So you're going to get like an infertile queen. That's so cool because you can put her in a hive and she will get mated. I get loads. My phone's always buzzing. My phone's always going with people from like May time up until August saying, oh, got a swarm, come and get it. I've also got my number out to a couple of pest controllers. So when they get calls about bee swarms, they just give me a ring and, oh, you can't get this from me, from the client and that. Don't charge for bee removal. In America, and that's a bit of a business, and people do charge to come and collect bees. But in essence, if I'm collecting a bee swarm off somebody, I could potentially make money from that because I could sell their honey. I could be really sneaky. I could box up this swarm, right, overwinter it and sell it the next year. And bees go for like 250 quid. So whenever people say, oh, do you want some money for coming to get the swarm? I'm like, no. If I'm passing your way again, I'll put a jar of honey in the car and I'll give you a jar of honey for this to say thank you, because you're giving me capital, really. Yeah. Some people do charge you. There's no law against it. There's kind of like a thing within the beekeeping community. You don't charge. If someone wants to give us a bottle of whiskey for picking up a swarm, or a box of chocolates, or a thank you, then yes, do that. But I'll never say, give us some money to get a swarm. It's just because you're gaining as a beekeeper, really. Yeah. Because we've got a WhatsApp group as well, Sarah, and everybody else, because there's a WhatsApp group here. As soon as I start getting swarm calls, as I like to call them, I'll put a message out on the WhatsApp just saying, here, I'm going to go to Tynemouth, or I'm going to be going to Newcastle. I'm going to collect a swarm. If anyone wants to come, just come along and join in. I find it really exciting. It's a bit of a buzz. So roles within the hive. Queen bee, as we all know, she lays the eggs. She gives off pheromones as well. Bees can't talk. They are, when the hive's closed, they're in complete darkness. So they're picking up pheromones, they're picking up smells, they're touching each other's antennae, and they're picking up vibrations as well. But the queen's giving out pheromones to say, like, maybe this is the rate of melee, we need more pollen, we need more nectar, everything's doing okay. She's just giving out signals that are passed on through like smells and pheromones. The queen can't sting, she's got the ability to sting. The most time when you see, the time that you see that mostly is when the swarm cells in the hive, and remember I said that there was like between 10 and 20 swarm cells, like all these little queen cells. And the first queen to emerge, she might go around and she might pierce all of the other queen cells and try to sting the queens before they emerge, so they all die before they can emerge. Then she's the queen. Again, a really interesting thing when you open a beehive, you might hear a tooting sound, or like it's sometimes described as like a quacking sound. It doesn't sound like a duck quacking though, but it sounds like more like an electronic toot. It's amazing, right? You'll open it, and the first time I heard it, I was like, "Can it be coming from your bees?" But it is. It's indicative that there's queens in cells, and what they'll do, again, it's going back to when people were saying in the Pagden split, when you leave that, when you've moved your colony, leave 2 queen cells, so you've got more chance of the queen emerging. But when there's 2 queens, or there's 3 queens in a cell, or even 10 queens in a cell in a hive, right? If you've just left them, the queens communicate with the colony. So if there's maybe 10 queens still in cells in a hive, right? They'll start tooting. And what they're saying to the colony is, oh, I'm in here. If a queen emerges, you can swarm. And it's okay because I'm still here. But if there's only 1 queen left and there's no more like tooting, she'll start like changing the sound of this little, I can't even impersonate it because I'll just do it wrong. And it's like, it sounds alien. But she'll just start making a different sound, right, to the colony, and to say, I'm the only queen. So when I emerge, don't swarm, because then there's no more viable queens and you've lost the game. So amazingly, the bees can kind of talk, and it's class. It sounds like an alien's spaceship or something. The first one make noises when there's a few of them in the hive to say, if I emerge, swarm. And yes, when the first swarm, the swarm with the mated queen, and any other queens come out, they can swarm again and again and again. And you're losing thousands of bees every time. But as soon as there's only 1 queen left in the cell, she makes a different noise to say, when I come out, it didn't swarm. And that research was only like kind of validated in the past year or so. Before that, the thought it was like queens kind of like egging each other on, saying like, whoa, I'm a queen and I'm going to come and kill you when I emerge, and I'm going to be the best, which is quite funny. But then scientists did a bit more research and realized it was actually communication to tell the colony whether there are more queens and whether they can swarm. Again, it's going back to like these amazing insects and these fantastic honeybees. Like everybody knows about them. Maybe they can't differentiate between a bumblebee or a honeybee, but people know the importance of honeybees, how they're great pollinators, and how they give us this lush honey. But there's still so much research to be done about them. There's still so much we don't understand about honeybees and the way they go about things. because they're so peculiar, I think maybe it's hard because as humans, we want to humanize everything, don't we? We want to put our like sorts of human traits and emotions on animals and things. But the way that these insects perceive, I mean, they've got 2 eyes in the head and 3 eyes in the top, for goodness sake. The way that they perceive the world is so different. They're not human at all.
Can
Strange.
I just ask you?
Please.
So when they swarm, will it be with a new spawned queen, or with the old existing queen? What's going to be most likely to stay behind?
When they're swarming, right? They've put up queen cups. They put an egg in a queen cup, or there's an egg in the queen cup, and they've charged it. They put in royal jelly and proteins and that. And then it started to seal that queen cell. Remember, we're talking about how it's like day 8 or 9 that they seal it.
Yeah.
So just as they're sealing the queen cell, a load of flying bees, right? They're going to like literally push the queen out of the hive and make her leave the hive and fly away. And there's going to be maybe 10,000, 20,000, sometimes even 30,000 swarms. Can be absolutely huge. And she's going to leave. Right. Before they've done that, some foraging bees, they're scouting out new locations, and they've already determined where the queen's going to go to. So they leave it first. That's a mated queen gone, and they've left behind 10, 20 queens in cells. If the queen emerges and goes around and stings all the other queens, you might not get another swarm. Or if you've left 2 queen cells and 1 queen comes out and stings the rest of the queens, she just remains. If that doesn't happen and 1 queen emerges and there's still loads of queens in there, another swarm's going to happen. This might be only 10,000 or 5,000 bees, this next swarm, which you call a cast swarm. They're going to leave with the virgin queen that's unmated. And then if another queen emerges, they might swarm again until the last queen remains in the hive.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
So that's the importance of when you are doing a split and you move the hive in a different position, you put the queen in a new box. She's got a couple of, she's got a bit of brood in there, but otherwise it's blank frame so she can start laying. This colony that you've moved, that's why you need to be so careful and make sure you get rid of as many queen cells as you decided is safe. Otherwise, you're going to get swarm after swarm after swarm after swarm. And also, when you do put the queen, Ian mentioned, when you do put the queen in the new box, make sure there's no queen cells on that frame. Otherwise, you've moved the queen and they're still going to swarm.
With you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We're going to go over this again, and we're going to see it for real when we're down in the apiary. Right? Yeah. And there's usually 1 queen in the hive, but again, when they supersede you and they're replacing the queen, sometimes that existing queen remains for a month or sometimes even a year. Beautiful thing. It's never happened in one of my hives. It's happened in a friend's hive. I've saw pictures of it. I really wanted it to happen in one of my hives. I'd love to see like 2 mother and daughters leading this hive. Cool. Yeah, roles in the hive, the worker bee. Again, beehives, bee colonies, it's a matriarchy. It's led by the females. And the picture on the left-hand side, that was when Ian first took me in the apiary, let me watch him open a beehive. The beehive instantly flew on my finger. And I spent ages watching this bee. You can see her legs, and there's a big yellow blob, and that's pollen that's being collected. She just came back from plants and she's resting on my finger. And I found it amazing. And I should have, but maybe I shouldn't have. I just didn't listen to what Ian was saying for the first good 10, 20 minutes. I was like, whoa, there's a bee here. And it just really reinforced my fascination with these bees. You notice that I'm wearing marigolds as well. I'm just wearing washing up gloves on my hands. You can get really thick leather gloves. But when you wear them, it usually makes you clunky with the frames and you're smashing things about and you can't quite grip stuff. So we've, through this community beekeeping project, you've all got a bee suit. You've all got a smoker. You've all got a hive tool, right? But you need to get your own gloves. So just pick up a pair of marigolds from the shops. If you struggle to pick up a pair of marigolds or you forget your marigolds, I'll have a couple of spares, but just try to get your own gloves. Even the leather gloves, they can sting you through them. They can sting you through the marigolds, but we're going to try our best not to get stung. As I said last week, it's inevitable. You're probably going to get stung at some point. But having the marigolds is going to make you much less clunky, and you're going to be less likely to drop frames and whatnot. Also, I'll not talk about it too much. I'm really dissing these leather gloves. But if you do get stung into the gloves, the attack pheromone is going to remain in the leather. And if you go back the next week, the bees still might pick up on that attack pheromone and come and try to attack you straight away. But the marigolds, you can just wash them dead easily. Yeah.
Isn't there an
Roses.
argument? Sorry, Dougie.
Loads.
Would it not be the case where if you can get stung through the gloves, maybe you shouldn't wear them anyway, and you'll be more aware and careful?
Definitely. But bees, as well as collecting the pollen and the nectar and the water, they collect propolis, which is from a tree. It's a sticky substance, and they use it like seal gaps in the hive, cracks in the hive. It's also got medicinal properties, which is really interesting bit of research. Rachel, I bet you're going to find that really interesting. And you can make propolis tinctures, and it's fantastic. There needs to be some more solid research. I'm very research driven, and the research just hasn't been done yet. But I already know that the conclusion's there. It's lush, but it's really sticky. And when you're inspecting a beehive, you get it all over your gloves, all over your hands. So the purpose of wearing the gloves really is to stop your hands from getting manky. So when you get back in the car, your hands stuck to the steering wheel, you kind of change gear, or you get it out of your clothes. So you sometimes change gloves in between inspections as well. Hive hygiene is paramount to disease reduction and management. So if your hands are covered in propolis, they are proper manky, and you go to inspect the next hive, you can either put on a new pair of gloves or, put on a new pair of gloves or put some more gloves over them. I used to just use like the blue nitride gloves that you see in cleaning jobs and whatnot, but I find they split easily. And then I was going through loads of gloves in one season, and I was like, I don't like waste. I try to recycle. I try to reuse as much as I can. And I was like, how are you, Dougie? You're throwing away these like plastic nitride gloves. Ultimately, they're going to go in the ocean. They're going to chew up a sea turtle or a whale, and I'll feel bad. But these marigolds I can clean, and that like one pair of marigolds can last us nearly the full season, which is class. Yeah. Is that all right, Paul?
Yeah.
Do you understand why we don't? But we can, and I have went in barehanded in the beehives before, and I just feel more connected to the bees. And yes, I do work much more slowly, but my hands get full of mank and propolis and that. Yeah. If you want to come down barehanded, do it. It's a lush experience.
No. I'm wearing 8 pairs of gloves and 4 suits.
Yeah. On your first inspections, class, maybe next year, try it barehanded. Never, ever do it like without a veil. You'll see like there's a lass on TikTok, an American beekeeper, and she does like extractions without a veil on. There's other like people that do extractions like swarm collection. That's what I mean by extraction, without veils on. There's some people going hives without veils on. There's this numpty who's got a smug smile sitting in front of his mate's hive, being like, "Hey, I'm a beekeeper with no veil on. I got stung." You're gonna get stung. Like I've got thick hair. A lot of other people got long hair. If a bee gets tangled in this, like it's tangled and it panics and it stings, you're gonna get stung. The bee's gonna die. That's not beekeeping, is it? So if you're not gonna wear gloves, fair enough. If you're not gonna wear a veil or a bee suit, you're not coming anywhere near my bees, basically, because it's daft. Like, so I rolled in the hive, worker bee. When this worker bee emerges, we saw this fascinating video that the National Geographic managed to put together of the bee transforming into a bee. And the first couple of days of its life, it's going to be a cleaner bee. So it's going to go around all the cells where a bee's emerged from, and it's going to clean out all the little bits of debris and bits and bobs, yeah? Again, I've tried to stay as on top of it as I can, but when you're inspecting bees and you pick up a frame, you'll sometimes see a bee actually emerging from a cell. And it's like witnessing childbirth. It's this magical, amazing moment. You see this little bee come out and it's proper fluffy, and it's like, whoa. But instead of like a human baby, you'll be like, need years and years and years of dependency. This bee straight away, bang, I'm going to get the task, I'm going to get to work. It's great. And you'll see her running around straight away with intent. It's amazing. First week or so, I suppose you can say the cleaning, and we're a cleaning bee. From days 6 to 12, they become a nurse bee. They're feeding the queen, they're feeding the older bees, and they're also feeding the younger bees, and they're helping look after the hive. They're staying in the hive. They still haven't left the hive. They won't leave the hive yet. Day 13 to 18, they're comb building. They take on the role of an undertaker in the process of nectar. So bees, we all know that they produce wax and they make like comb out of wax. Paul, you mentioned last week, the frames They're a wooden frame, and we put a plastic sheet inside of that frame, and the bees can draw this out and make like 3D cells that eggs can be put inside of. The way that they make this wax, it's incredible. You'll probably see it this year. Underneath their abdomen, right? Underneath here, they've got like little slots where they literally secrete little flakes of wax. And that's how they then build up the beehive. They need the temperature to be right, and they need lots of honey. They need lots of stores to be able to do this. Some beekeepers, and what you can do when you first get your nuke is you put in some sugar syrup, and that gives them enough energy to secrete wax and to make this wax. Once you've got a couple of hives, you don't have to use sugar water. You can just nick a box of honey from one hive and put it on the next. It's a magical thing. Undertaker, bees are going to die. They don't live for long. So when they drop down on the floor, these 13 to 18-day-old bees will pick up the dead bees and take them away. Hive hygiene. In processing nectar, basically they'll go on the frames and cells of nectar, and they'll flap, they'll heat it up, so the water content reduces, and it turns into honey. They then turn into a guard bee, like defending the hives from wasps and other predators, and also take orientation flights. They'll start leaving the hive, doing a little flight in front of the hive, a couple of meters in front of it, and then come back just to learn where that hive is. And then from day 22 onwards, they go out and forage. Nectar, pollen, water, propolis. They're foraging those key things. The way that they change from role to role, that depends on, yes, their age, of how old they are in days, and also the pheromones that the queen's releasing. Do we need more nurse bees? Is there a big increase in brood? Do we need to build loads of comb? I need you to be comb builders. She's releasing pheromones. Right, if you can, change your role, change your role. She kind of speaks, she kind of put out a memo. And that's basically all the jobs inside of a hive that the workers are doing. It's incredible. Workers can lay eggs. We'll talk about this when we talk about pests and diseases, because I see it as a pest. If there's no queen and you haven't put another queen, if you haven't raised a queen in the hive, the workers will start laying non-fertile eggs, and you just get a hive filled with drones. There's ways that we can figure that out, and there's ways to deal with that. We're going to talk about that when we talk about pests and diseases. Next slide. Drone. The useless males. And they're inside the hive. They're the much fatter bees with big round eyes on the head. It's difficult really to tell by pictures, but you can see it when you look in a frame which one's a drone. And the can't sting. Drones won't sting you, and they mate with other queens in drone congregation areas at BCA. So again, in Newcastle, in Whitley Bay, in Shields, in Tynemouth, there's these little areas that are DCAs. All the drones fly there, and they wait for queens to come along, and they mate with the queen. Upon mating with the queen, bang, they explode, and that's the end of the drone, which is a really peculiar behaviour. Lifespan, you asked me this last week, how long does a drone live for? I searched in lots of books and websites. I asked beekeepers, and I got lots of different answers. That's going to happen every time you research something on honeybees. You'll ask me something, you'll ask somebody else something, you get loads of different answers. Sometimes even I'll give you like 3 different answers to one question because of either the things that I've found out or been told. There's barely any definitive answers in things that happens with honeybees. So be prepared to like be absolutely confused of things. You just have to draw a conclusion that you think fits best, and then that you can apply to experience. But you'll change your mind loads. Queen bees live on average for 2 to 4 years. Worker bees on average 5 to 7 weeks. Drone bees could live for as long as 12 weeks. Yeah.
Doug, just a quick irrelevant question. If drones are fairly useless,
yeah,
why does there seem to be so many of them? Why don't they just have a couple?
Because Fran asked earlier about how many times a beehive might swarm, and that could be many, many times in a year. So there needs to be loads of these drones around to deal with these new queens and make sure that they're all mated. Although I always refer to drones as useless, that's within inside of the hive. They're vital to carrying on the genetics and making sure that queens can be mated. So they do have a crucial role just as much as everybody else, but that's only like a singular role of mating. So there needs to be loads of drones to deal with all these new queens that are going to go out and try to be mated. And of course, the queen doesn't just mate with one drone. She can, in one flight, she'll mate with many drones. And then she'll come back to her hive, and she might even go on another, what we call the maiden flight. There must be a better term for that. We're going to have to think of one. She might go on another flight to go and get mated the next day, and the next week.
Okay.
So there's loads of drones because there's loads of queens. And they explode, like once they've like inseminated a queen, bang, they're gone, they're dead. So there needs to be more drones. So we touched on this earlier, like when you're doing the split, you've got a colony, you've removed the queen and you've left a queen cell in there. But if that queen doesn't manage to emerge, you leave some eggs in there, because a colony without a queen can raise a new queen. Yeah. If you've got a colony that's got no queen inside of it, as long as there's eggs in there, they can make a new queen. If you've got a colony, if we've opened a hive, and Adam, you've opened it and you've said, oh no, there's no queen in here, there's no queen cells in here, there's no eggs in here. What we can do is I can say, right, Simon, go to the next hive, find a frame of eggs and put this frame of eggs in the hive. And then the bees can produce a new queen, which is really useful to know and really useful for carrying on. We said some beekeepers knock down all queen cells, leaving only one. Some beekeepers will leave two. The reason behind them leaving two is because even though it's a queen cell, the egg and the larvae and the pupae, something might have happened in that process and there might not be an actual queen inside. It might have died halfway through. So they leave two just in case. That just in case can lead to a swarm. Make your own decisions. When we're down there at the apiary, we can, when we're doing splits, we can sometimes leave two, we can sometimes leave one, and we'll see the outcome. We'll see what happens. But get a swarm, it's not the end of the world, is it? We'll try not to lose them, but it's not the end of the world. You can unite the colonies again, bring them back together. There's other methods such as the demaree, the shuck swarm, or the cloak board. Look on YouTube, look in your books for them, and I can cover them later on, but I don't want to tell you all the different methods because it just gets confusing. If there's a charged queen cell, do a split, do an artificial swarm. You can knock it back and hope for the best, but you're probably going to get a swarm. Find a charged queen cell, do something about it. We're nearly finished, guys. I've just got one more slide and a couple of more videos. We're just going to briefly touch on inspections, which we're going to talk more about next week, about what we expect to find. And well, here's a little slide just explaining, like when you're going to do an inspection, you want it to be warm. You want it to be typically t-shirt weather. So if you go outside and you feel, I can take my jumper off and wear a t-shirt, it's probably a good day to go and see your bees. If you go to the beehive and bees are flying, it's probably a good day to do an inspection. You need to have a purpose. In between spring and autumn, your purpose is swarm management. That's why you go inside of a beehive every 7 days. As we saw, queen cells are capped off around 9 days. And once it's been capped off, it's probably too late to do anything about it. Not always, but probably. So if you're in every 7 days and you're doing the inspections effectively, you're probably going to keep on top of your swarm management, but you're still going to have a swarm because everyone gets a swarm. While you inspect and talk, say what you see. It helps you remember what's going on. If you see, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. The best way to remember something is to see it. If you stand outside of Asda or Tesco or Lidl, because loads of shops available, you'll probably hear people walk into the supermarket saying, right, bread, milk, eggs, or you'll hear them saying toilet roll, whatever else they're after. Because if you say something to yourself, you remember it. So while you're inspecting, say what you see. It's good practice. And if you're anything like me, you're going to tell the bees loads, and you're going to tell them what you had for tea, you're going to tell them what you saw on pictures or whatever. Talk to your bees, helps keep you calm, keeps you calm, keep them calm. Go slow, go with a purpose. And while you're inspecting, you're going to figure something out that's not quite normal. And then you're going to stop and you're going to say, right, what do I need to do? Do I need to do a manipulation? Do I need to do this? And keep your purpose in mind. Or you might just be going in the first couple of times, seeing what's going on and just looking, that's your purpose. But just keep purposeful. If you become uncomfortable while you're inspecting the beehive, close it up and walk away. Close it up, move on to the next beehive. Close it up and do it next week. Don't fight them with smoke. If you can deal with stings and it's not hurting you, carry on, fair enough. But if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, if you're starting to feel stressed, the bees get more stressed, you're going to get stung more bees die. bottom line is, if you get uncomfortable, if it's starting to get too much, just close it up. There's nothing wrong with that. Bees' temperaments change. You can have a lush hive that's lovely to work with, and the next week they're like the raddest, feistiest bees you've ever met, and they're going wild. That might be because there's a heavy flow on. It might be because the queen's died. There's many different reasons why temperament changes. Sometimes we kind of figure it out. They just get a bit rag. Just close it up. No point of going. An inspection, you might know you need to do a manipulation, so it might be to kind of manipulation and make a record. Write down after you've done an inspection about what's happened. So at the end of the year, you can review what's going on. If you're going to be queen rearing, if you're going to start raising your own queens, you want to do that. You want to select it from a good colony. So good records will help you decide which one's a good colony. Also, a record will tell you, like, when maybe when Paul goes in, you might write down, right, I saw 6 frames of brood, 2 frames of stars. Look at that note when you open the hive, and if now you've noticed that there's 4 frames of brood and 4 frames of brood and 1 frame of stars, why is my colony getting smaller? What's going on? Is it autumn, or have I got a problem on my hands? Or if you saw that a colony is rapidly expanding, why? Let's figure out why that is. Do I need to do something about it? Or is everything I read? Make a record. Inspections. Let me see the time and we'll see what we can actually do with this. It's 20 to 12. Now we're in 40 minutes or 35 minutes. Thanks for hanging in with me. I've got a video here that I hope it'll work and I hope it might be effective, right? And it's just an example of inspections. It's me doing an inspection down at the Meadowell last June. And hopefully from there, you're going to be seeing frames with queen cups on, and you're going to see a frame with the charged queen cell, like a charged queen cup. And what I decided to do then, that was around the time when I was told off a experienced beekeeper, if you find a queen cup, just knack it, get rid of it, and go back in 7 days, and your colony should be okay. Lesson otherwise, that colony did swarm. I should have just did what I was told from the start and to do a split. I thought I'd try something different, thinking I was all clever in that, but I'm not clever in that. And my bee swarmed. So I had to wait another month for a new queen to be made. But it happens, you know. I'll stop talking from real life and I'll start talking from a YouTube video. Yeah, also this would be useful to kind of show you how you take apart a hive, how you take off the roof, you put it upside down, your crown bowl goes on top of that, your supers go on top of that, your queen excluder. We'll start seeing like what happens. The bees start flying, they're all around you. That doesn't mean they're raggy, it doesn't mean they're feisty. That's what bees do. And they're going to land on your shoulders, they're going to land your veil in your hands. That's nice. Can you hear that? Thumbs up or wave if you can hear that. Yay!
Hey everyone, happy summer solstice.
Yep.
All the dads out there, happy Father's Day. I want to show you my bees. The allotment, I've got loads of stuff in there. My favourite thing I think I'm growing this year is my sweet corn in the kohlrabi, because I never grew kohlrabi before. But what these can give me is my favourite crop of all, sweet, sweet honey. And I love going through them every week. Every week I come down, look through my bees, tell them all my stories. And I think that is fascinating insects. I've been interested in nature and animals and just life, I suppose.
I'm going to skip that because I've talked too much.
First thing you do,
I've taken off the roof, upside down on the floor.
This is the crown board that goes on top of the hive.
Perspex, so I can look through it before I open it.
They're everywhere.
That crack.
That's a deep box.
Crack a box.
Big box filling up with honey. A much smaller box. That's filling up with honey too.
See, the bees are flying, so
box.
taking apart the room, but still quite calm.
See, I want to leave every hive with a full super box of honey, about 30 pounds of honey, to get them through the winter. So I won't harvest anything from this. I'll only harvest what's above. I might take it if I know that I can fill it back up. Otherwise, I'll leave them to it.
Some beekeepers take all the honey and feed them with sugar syrup. I don't see the point, like,
This
it's not
bit
nice.
of metal, this grate, is a queen excluder. All the worker bees can come up with the pollen and the nectar and store it up above, but the queen can't get through. Let's work through. Hey girls.
The sharp end of my tool is to separate that queen excluder because it's stuck down with propolis. That's sticky stuff.
Always make sure the queen isn't on top.
Bad doggy.
Don't want to lose the queen.
Yeah.
So these are on a double brood, well, brood and a half. So they've got a full brood box and then a super. Plenty of space for that queen to lay. Now on that frame.
First frame's usually blank. When you take any frames out, take them out one by one. The first one's usually blank. There's no on it.
What is got going on, girls? Lovely. When I'm looking through as well, I'm looking for signs of eggs. I'm looking for signs of brood. If I see eggs, the queen's been there in the past 3 days. You don't need to find the queen when you inspect the bees. You need to see signs that she's there. I'm also looking for signs of disease.
Yeah.
The varroa mite, the little red mite, that likes to go on the bees in the brood stage, in the pupa stage, and that can give them, I think it's called chronic bee paralysis.
Deformed wing virus.
You get bees with dodgy wings and they don't form very well. It can devastate a hive.
So picking up frames one by one.
Eggs, larvae and brood. One of them tried to sting us. I'll have a little peek to check the hive health. This beehive, one colony, it's almost like one entity, but there's also individual bees in there. So you want to look at them as individuals, you want to look at it as a whole.
Getting nervous now, see I was hesitating to pick up the frame. So I've nearly been stung and I was getting nervous.
I see here. That's a queen cell. All this is worker brood.
See where I'm pointing my finger? It's like the cells are being capped off, yeah? And it's flat, so that's worker brood. Over here, if you can see my mouse, it's quite hard to tell on this video, but that's bumped, it's domed. That's drone brood. That's going to be the males. And then here, which I'm going to show much closer in the video, is a queen cup. It's on the middle of the frame. Maybe it's a supersedure. If there's more of them, maybe it's a swarm cell. But what I do the wrong thing in this video. I think it's important to highlight mistakes just as much as it's important to highlight the things that you should do. And people say learn from mistakes, don't make them yourself. You're still going to make mistakes. I got told all these mistakes and I still made them just because we're human, aren't we?
Well, that is drawn out a queen cell. Let's see if there's anything in it. There's no in there. Oh, there was an egg. And because it's in the middle of a frame, they might be doing a supersedure, so they might be trying to make a new queen. I'm not concerned that I knocked that down, because there's eggs, there's brood. They can do it again if they want. If I find too many queen cells, we're going to split them. We're going to make them think that they've swarmed.
I'm going to skip ahead to a different beehive just to show again how to take apart
more brood, worker brood.
The beehive. So I've carried on the inspection.
The foragers go back into the hive, offload nectar, they give that to other bees who go and store it, offload the pollen, and back out they go.
A lovely sight there.
Back out to get more.
days.
There you go. Let's go through another colony. I'll try to keep my smoker out your way.
Boy, going to hive, quick puff of smoke. Meet your
Hey,
hive tool,
girls.
dog.
Hello there. Crown board comes off. I've got the roof upside down on the floor. Crown board goes on top of that. I use my tool to break the super.
Love that sound.
Usually not as drastic as that. That's a pretty heavy box there. That goes on top of the crown board. The crown board's on top of the roof, upside down on the ground. I don't want to be standing in between that because bees are going to fly back and forth.
You do sometimes want to look through your supers, because of course, when they're running out of space to store honey, you want to put another super on top. You always do that at the end. If you start an inspection by looking through the supers, you're clunking around, you're moving stuff, you're going to disturb the brood nest. By the time you get down there, these bees are proper riled up and they're going to be raging, they're going to sting you, and they're going to be defensive. If you take the supers off, look for the brood nest box first, then look for the supers, you're just going to get nicer bees.
Next super. It's a fair weight as well. I'd say that's about half full. Now I'm down to the brood nest, the brood box. A little bit of smoke.
Maybe too much smoke.
Get the queen excluder off. And the important job, we check that the queen isn't on the queen excluder.
Every
So
time.
if she is, now pull it down. She gets mixed up in the supers. Eggs
Only
start
found the
getting laid in
queen on there
supers.
once.
It's a mess.
Bees that found her.
We don't
I'll
want
do
that.
it every time, just in case. Piss them off now, Dougie.
Hey girls. Where have you been? Nothing on that frame.
There's the sheet of
The end
foundation you
frame's
put
usually
in.
empty.
Blank. I'm slowly pulling that up. I'm being
We're drawing that out. That's how it starts. A sheet of wax. I want them to draw out that wax. You see? From that blank sheet, they're starting to make the cells. Amazing, eh?
Stop that there. I hope it was just a good example of you seeing, instead of just talking about it, but how you do take apart the beehive. You're taking the roof off, you're taking the crown board off, you're taking the supers off. Roof's upside down, crown board on top, supers are stacked up. Then you're taking out the frames one by one. Yeah? Class. So that's the end of what I wanted to share today. Again, there's ways to find out more. As you heard from Ian at the very beginning, it was great for him to come along to speak about it. Join the association. Even if you don't join up and subscribe, like with money and that, join the Facebook group, check out the website. I'm going to be doing the presentation for them on the 13th of April, and I'll be blabbing on about my first 3 years of being a beekeeper. Check out the BBKA. Again, if you use it, they've got Facebook, and they've got a website. On YouTube, you can either look at Norfolk Honey Company or any other YouTuber. Now is a great time to do it because there's so much available online. Because of lockdown, a lot of people have went online and made information available there. Check it out. I've got a YouTube video as well, YouTube channel as you just saw. I've got a lot of me bee stuff on there. And there's also daft videos of us in the allotment or out in the woods doing stuff. Check it out if you want to. Mostly boring stuff. There's the Bee Improvement and Bee Breeders Association, BIBA. They have got so many videos, and they're focusing at the moment on showing beekeepers how to raise your own queens. I mentioned it last week. There's a big change happened with Brexit that stopped the importations of bee colonies, which is great. I didn't really want Brexit. I'll not get political, but one good thing about it is to stop the importation of bee colonies. Varroa, as we said, we don't have a definitive reason of why the Varroa might's here, but I've got a sneaky suspicion it's because of the importation of bees. The importation of bees obviously brings pests and diseases that are present in other parts of the world and wasn't present here. We're an island. How else going to get here apart from importation? So there's been a big campaign in the past few years, surfacing and beekeeping circles to stop importing queens, raise your own queens. It's easy to do so. As I said before, if there's eggs in a hive, you can make a queen. Yeah, people are still importing them because they want them cheap and they want them quick. So there's been campaigns to try to raise your own queens and basically to get around this Brexit law to stop the importation of queens. There's a commercial bee farmer who's decided to import all of the bees to Northern Ireland, which apparently isn't part of this deal. He's going to import them all to Northern Ireland, then import them from Northern Ireland to England to get around that. I think it's a bad move because you're going to potentially bring more pests and diseases in. There's a pest and disease called small hive beetle, which is devastating colonies of bees in Italy and in the USA. It's awful. And if that gets into Britain, right, and we have to deal with Varroa and small hive beetle, the odds are going to be way stacked against us. We need to try to stop that from happening. And the Asian hornet's on its way as well. That's already been found in southern Britain. So we're going to have loads to deal with. So the only way that I see we can stop these pests and diseases coming into the country is to raise your own bees. Bibba's got a strong message about that. Yeah. Also, if you want to, next Wednesday, I work 1 day a week at the Meadowell as a gardener, and we're doing tree planting at the Meadowell next Wednesday. We've got 500 native trees, including the English oak, and they're going to be planted outside the centre. We're looking for volunteers to come and help plant those trees. As part of that, we are saying that, of course, if you want to do it in memory of someone that we've maybe lost in the past few years, do it. I've lost a couple of pals, unfortunately, the past few years, and I'll be planting trees in memory of them, but also just planting them because in 30, 50 years' time, that area is going to be full of these really strong native trees. And what better way to improve an area than to plant a tree? If you want to get involved, drop us a line on the WhatsApp group or an email, or if you see us, ask us about it. We do ask that you book onto it just by dropping an email to the garden lead, Andy. We need as many people as we can. There's 500 trees there. The sessions are at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Get involved if you can, or if you want to. Again, a few of you come from the Meadowell already, right? I know a few of you don't or might not have ever been there. Check out what they do at the Meadowell Centre. They've got a thriving community centre inside. There's loads of services available for people, but they've also got a really busy garden, and you can become a volunteer there. You can help out in general work. Rachel, I will add you to the WhatsApp group. Yep. They do loads of lush stuff in the garden. You can either come down and be assigned an activity, so there might be something that needs to be done, or you can come down and say, like, look, I want to grow leeks, so I want to do this, I want to do that, and you'll be allowed to do that. Come and join in, do what you want, and join the community side of it. Dead relaxed, dead informal, and it's a lush space. I love it down there. I've grown very fond of it over the years. Way, look at that dafty. That was my first jar of honey. Look how happy I am with that. Again, I'm a beekeeper first from the interest in insects and just wanting to be with these fascinating things, but a lovely byproduct of bees that we all know about is that sweet, sweet honey. It's lush. So I unmute yourself. You can give us a comment, tell us something that you enjoyed about that if you want, or ask a question. If there's no questions or comments, that's fine. You can do it on WhatsApp. You can ask us afterwards. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Dougie. That was great.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks for coming along. Does anybody, if you've been doing some research outside of this, if you come across little topics or things that you don't quite understand or you want to talk about, you can let us know and I can prepare that for the next session. Otherwise, next week, I'm going to go into a bit more depth of your first inspection and what when you're bringing up the frames, you expect to see things in a certain pattern, in a certain order. We can look into that a bit more detail. And then start talking about pests and diseases, because that again is a bit of an important bit. Aye. And I know, Paul, you've got the Haynes manual. You're going to be busy with it right now, but later in the year, you might have it available to loan out. I've also got the Haynes manual if anybody wants to loan that copy off me. or borrow, which way around you would say it. If you want to borrow that off me, yeah, give us a shout and I'll drop it off. And you can have a little look through the book. But as well, YouTube's got loads of stuff. Of course, Facebook's got groups as well. There's like the British beekeepers, British and Irish beekeepers. There's Beekeeping UK. Join the forums there. And people usually post interesting stories or have interesting discussions about bees. Yeah. Cool. And of course, what else do I need to add? That in what we'll play it by ear really, because Corona seems to be calming down, which is fantastic. We'll play it by ear, but we can expect to be meeting outside at the Medical Centre maybe the next 3 or 4 weeks. And we'll keep it at this time, Saturday morning. When we meet outside, it'll be 10:30. We'll start cracking on with bees. Lovely. Bye.
Yay.
See you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Ta-da.
Bugging up. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Lush to have you here.